slow playing trapping in Texas Hold'em. Slow playing is a deceptive strategy where you disguise a strong hand by playing passively, checking or calling instead of betting or raising. The goal is to trap opponents into betting so you can extract more chips. 1. When to slow play, ideal conditions. Slow playing works best when these factors align. 1. You have a monster hand. Examples: flopped sets, 3 of a kind, 7 7 mind on a flop of 7 1, jam full houses on a board of A and J, nut flushes and straights, KQ on a board of A thought 10 5. Why? Betting too aggressively early might scare opponents away. 2. The board is dry, not many draws available. Example: you have KK key and the flop is K8 through 3, very dry. Why? Opponents are unlikely to improve their hand, so checking lets them bet with weak hands. 3. Opponents are aggressive. They like to bet bluff. If your opponent bluffs often, slow playing maximizes their mistakes. Example: if you check and they bet aggressively, you can call and let them keep bluffing. 4. You're in position, acting last. In position, you can let your opponent bet into you, then raise later. Out of position, slow playing can be riskier since your opponent might check behind. 2. When not to slow play, avoid these situations. 1. Wet or draw heavy boards. Example: you have A-Sai on a flop of J10 9 they. Why? There are too many straight and flush draws. You should bet big to protect your hand. 2. Multi-way pots, 3+ players. If several players see the flop, slow playing is dangerous. Someone could hit a draw or a lucky card. Example: you have QQ on a board of Q font 9-8. Instead of slow playing, you should bet to deny equity to straight draws. 3. Against passive players who rarely bet. If your opponent only calls and never bets, slow playing is ineffective. Instead, bet for value to build the pot. 3. Slow playing tactics, how to execute a trap effectively. 1. Checking the flop instead of betting immediately. Best used when you're in position and the board is dry. Opponent is aggressive and likely to bet. Example hand: you have K Sao K and the flop is K 8 sly 8 Sai 3C. 1. Opponent checks. You check behind to appear weak. 2. Turn. They bet because they think you have nothing. 3. You call or raise, trapping them. 2. Calling instead of raising, underplaying strength. Best used when your opponent is aggressive. If they bet, just call, trap them, instead of raising right away. Example hand: you have J-Sa, J-Hat, and the board is J7-2. 1. Opponent bets $20. 2. Instead of raising, you just call, making them think you're weak. 3. On the turn, they barrel, bet again. And now you can raise big. 3. The check raise, turning the trap into aggression. If you check and your opponent bets, you can then raise big. This makes it look like a bluff, so they may call with weak hands. Example hand: you have 10-10, and the board is 10 fawns 6 sun 2. 1. You check. 2. Opponent bets. 3. You raise big, making it look like a bluff. 4. Advanced slow play techniques. 1. Inducing a bluff, making your opponent bet. If you're against an aggressive player, checking can bait them into bluffing the turn or river. Example: you have AA and the board is A7 2 say. Check the flop. Let your opponent bluff on the turn, then raise big on the river. 2. Delayed betting, acting weak before attacking. Check flop, bet turn, looks like a delayed continuation bet. Example: you have Q Sao Q and the board is Q5 Vamp 2 on. Check the flop. If opponent checks again on the turn, bet small. Opponent may mistakenly think you're weak and call or raise. 5. Risks of slow playing, common mistakes to avoid. 1. Checking too much, missing value. If your opponent is passive, slow playing is a mistake because they won't bet for you. Solution: bet for value instead. 2. Letting draws get there, being too greedy. If you slow play too long, opponents can hit a straight or flush for free. Solution: on draw-heavy boards, bet to protect your hand. 3. Playing predictably. If you only slow play with strong hands, experienced opponents will catch on. Solution: mix in bluffs occasionally so they can't read you. 6. The ultimate slow play move, the river trap. If you have a monster hand, you can check on the river to bait your opponent into bluffing. This works best against aggressive players who will try to steal the pot. Pro tip: if your opponent bets big on the river, don't just call, raise all in. Final takeaways on slow playing. Best used against aggressive players and in heads-up pots. Only slow play when the board is safe, not draw heavy. Mix it up. Don't slow play every big hand or opponents will notice. Use check raises and delayed betting to keep opponents guessing.